What's your name, sir?
DC Mackay.
DC Mackay.
So, this is DC Mackay of Kitty Brewster Police Station in Aberdeen. And it's a very interesting situation that's come across here. And it's all leading and looking only to cast aspersions upon myself to cause immediate and untold violence towards me. And that's the way it's been accepted. Because when I look at the Office of Constable, when I look at the investigatory powers warrants, when I look at all warrants, when I look at what this constable was doing at this time with the other constables, you'll notice in the video there was 3 of them. I don't know the others' names. They didn't offer them to me. They didn't speak to me. No idea who they are. Just a big snarling face, as you've seen. But DC Mackay here felt the need to... So, the part of the video that you've looked at here is basically... I have been arriving home on my push bike. And on the left-hand side, where I slow down the video, there are police officers standing, quite evidently. And I have no idea what he thinks at that time. But I know when I go past, he goes to the left hand inside his jacket and starts speaking to it. So I take it he's radioing at that time for assistance to come down the minute this scowling-faced officer seen me. So I go into the house, and when I'm arriving at the house, I'm about to go in the door with my bike, when there's 2 people coming across the car park who I first met by selling a base, and they're saying hello. So on my camera helmet, I decide to turn the helmet off because I'm not travelling anymore. There's no chance of taxis, contract drivers and commercial vans, council vans, bucket motors, bus drivers, got any chance of running me over without it being recorded, right? So, or general people in the street as well. And it also records all the abuse that I come under and the people that are taking photographs of me right, left and centre. So, I'm not doing any of that. I'm back at the address, everything's fine. It's 2 people who I know and trust that's walking towards me. And as they've said hello to me, they've looked up the lane that I've came down. And I'm wondering what they're looking at. So I look up and I see 3 men standing. When I look back at them, the people who are friends, they said to me, well, said to them, who are you? And someone called out they were the police. And 3 plainclothes police officers, I knew them would be police officers, but unidentified, no reason not to identify themselves, came and decided to utilise the on-the-spot stop and search. So they decided to utilise that power that they have to stop and search people. Now this is where it gets interesting. Because as it was I that was arriving back to my house and passing an adjacent address, which a warrant was busy being executed at, 3 officers out of 8 felt the need to leave the locus of the execution of that warrant, leave the boundaries of the warrant, and come and act as if with the Office of Constable out with that warrant, and approach myself and my address. Although they hadn't proceeded to come up the path to come to my address, they never came to my address. They only proceeded after realising there was 2 other people there. So, when they've come to execute a search, they would turn up under the awareness that they don't know who anyone is. Or they would turn up knowing who people were, and knowing there was a reason to stop and search them. In which, in my case, there is none. I'm not known for drugs or weapons, so there's no need to stop and search me. I've never been stopped and searched. Once I was searched during an inquiry, it was into something else, and my name taken, and then sent on my way, but I have never been stopped, nor searched, for any drugs, paraphernalia, weapons, or anything else for that matter. So there's no reason to stop and search me, and they certainly have never done it in my whole history of being up in the northeast of Scotland. They know better not to, because they know I know the Office of Constable, they know I know the statutory instruments that provides for them, and provides for my rights and protections, and I'm quite happy to utilise that with any constable anywhere. But I've never had to, because there's no reason to stop and search me. So wouldn't you find it strange that what the police officers proceeded to do was search the two people that was walking across the car park, who have since heard were known to these particular officers, and not search me? That looks very suspicious, and that's exactly what the aim of the game was. I don't think it was planned. I don't think it was something that they could have created, anyone could have created, but it was something they jumped on the opportunity of. And for two officers to walk up under a prescribed idea that they're going to be searching the two individuals, and one officer's going to speak to me and not search me, how would each officer know to conduct themselves in that way if they're not actually speaking in front of us or announcing what they're going to do next? No disclosure as to why they're stopping us, and no reason to take details. So there's many things I find wrong with that. Many things. And the procurement to make things look like really terrible, whilst I am in the knowledge, and so many other people are in the knowledge, of someone who's got a police handler who's actually instigating the whole thing. Caught out several years ago, caught out again and again, and just been caught again. But the climax to this is really the on the spur of the moment decision making that must have happened. I mean, I wouldn't have known that these two people were walking across the car park. They wouldn't have known I was coming back to the address. Neither of us knew there was a warrant being executed. And there, everything came together within about 15 seconds of me being seen, arriving back on my bike. So what was the police's intention to pull me into the arena of the execution of this warrant was all about? What skullduggery was going on there? So DC Mackay and the other two officers that were there, I'm going to put in a complaint, although I've no faith in the complaints process. I do believe this is in the public interest because of the endangerment and the threat to life you have brought so many people. And the other reason it's in the public interest is whilst in the execution of a warrant, someone would have managed that warrant. There would have been a group meeting in the morning about the execution of the warrant, and people would have had a strategic part to play in the execution of that warrant. If there's 8 members of the police force there, the police service, you'll need to excuse me, but if I actually breathe and cough into an air quality monitor, the formaldehyde levels go through the roof because I've been sitting here breathing it in for too long now. Again, Police Scotland appears to have influenced a particular landlord because he's acted in the very same way, the very same modus operandi and alimony behaviour that all others have continued to. After we've had a succession of landlords and letting agents come back to us months later, sometimes years later, some of them tell us at the time that it was Police Scotland and a local authority that provided all information that caused them to do the things that they've done to us. Removal men also claim that it was the two authorities that was informing them of information that caused them to smash up our stuff and steal some of it. We got this information by promising the directors of these companies we wouldn't take them to court if they told us the truth. And they persisted with their legal knowledge, impressing on them that this wouldn't be an issue for us to take them to court and uncover us in a court. It was better to uncover it here and I would just should pursue the initial authorities for the many Article 8 violations and many other statutory domestic law offences, European offences and international. And they seem to listen and understand these things and find me genuine, find my genuine person. And when I would describe the situation in which we were living under and how we come to need removal men in the first place and how long that had been going on for, they were absolutely mortified. They were horrified. They were shocked. They were asking all sorts of questions. Why don't we go to the papers? Why would, you know? We've been asked everything. But DC Mackay and the other two officers, when you were executing that warrant, you were 40% of a team. That whether it's health and safety, security, whatever, that court order required a team of people to execute that warrant. And I better add just now that there was nothing suspicious to be finding at this particular address. And nothing was found. So the whole warrant and the execution of the warrant and search was absolutely bogus. But whilst you were executing that warrant, sorry, I can't help reading the screen, which is something different. So I'm actually speaking whilst reading something different. But anyway, whilst you were executing that warrant, you decided to, for many reasons, violate the warrant and come out with the execution of that warrant, then act as if with Officer Constable with the powers of stop and search, which you didn't have the powers to do at that time. When I looked deeper into the situation, I discovered that the police had made a welfare check at the same address. And when I looked at the common law powers for this, there was none. When I looked at statutory instruments to see if the police could initiate a welfare check with no warrant, and they couldn't. They had to be provided with information that then craved a warrant, acting along with their partners and no doubt social work department at the local authority, adult protection support, who knows. It's a welfare check. All sorts of elements of the local authority and the police and their partnerships and the healthcare partnership includes many, many different departments. But out of all these departments, no one could come up with evidence that was enough to crave a warrant and validate a warrant to allow the police to act to do a welfare check. I looked a bit deeper and I discovered that the police could only do a welfare check if there was an immediate need to remove children or any vulnerable adult from the address. And that would be the only time that the police would have powers to enter an address, as if with warrant, to execute the removal of the vulnerability. They don't have the common law powers to go in and do a general welfare check and just to see if everything's alright and gather information. That information gathered would be illegal. But a breach of the GDPR 2018 as well. It would need to be deleted. It couldn't be used in any ongoing inquiry, such as, then, the craving of a warrant for a drug search. Can't do that. Because what would happen there is the people involved who went through this unnecessary trouble, who are good people, you know, it's like I cut their grass, they keep the place tidy, and they're actually the only people that's called me in to tidy up the place and maintain it and keep on top of it. And I'm more than happy to do so because the place just goes from one state to the next. So they look after their community, they look after their children, they look after their house, they're fairly quiet living. You know, it's the dog barks, a man shouts at the dog to get the dog to be quiet, but that's about the only noise there is. And I'm helping out in that situation. But You know, it's like when you look at a bill of suspension. You know, when you can't raise an appeal against a warrant being craved in the sheriff's decision, but you can raise a bill of suspension on the grounds on which the warrant was craved. If the craving of that warrant was developed from any reports that came from the initial assessment that was made when the police thought they had the power to go in and do a general assessment and welfare check, then the whole thing crashes. But even worse, whilst in the execution of this warrant has been validated, obviously, and signed by a sheriff, based on potential information that was only gained through an unlawful access into an invasion, Article 8. You know, there's many things could go. I'm not going to start mentioning statutes and acts here. There are many violations into this private family's life. And to look at what's actually happened to the family with fear. The family's frightened, they can't sleep. It's upset the children. But when 40% of the team decide to leave during the execution of that warrant, it then causes major problems for someone who's fighting for the life of their caree to get medical care and fighting for the life, for the truth, everything to get out. And appears to be getting pushed into a situation and making a declaration as to who he really fucking is. Because no one's backing off and no one's helping with the situation. So just to let you know, DC Mackay, there is going to be a complaint coming your way. Of course, you're more than welcome to write to me at my address, like you have got, and you can apologise and correct me where I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, I know I'm not wrong. Ask your lawyer that. Ask any lawyer that. In fact, you don't really need to go far to read about the executions, the warrants, Grade A warrants, B warrants. You read it all. It was recently updated in 2020, 2021. I think there was amendments in 2023 as well. You need to learn, DC Mackay, when you've got the availability as a police officer to execute as if with warrant and to execute yourself and police stop and search powers when you're actually in the middle of the execution of a warrant, a court order. The difficulty does arise when you look at the basis in which the warrant was craved on. And I certainly have offered the people involved the benefit of sitting with me for maybe 3 or 4 hours to go through some paperwork in detail and write up a document. And that is something that they're considering. But for such a young family to have savings and to have their savings removed like that, with no evidence of anything, then to act out with the officer constable, you know, you can imagine a swollen ball bag. Well, this is a ball bag. It's not going to swell any bigger, no matter how hard you kick it. The officer constable has been breached on many, many levels. In the craving of that warrant, the execution of that warrant, the unjust enrichment that's been made, the money that's getting made, monies that's been taken, the harassment into people's lives, the creation of work for everyone, from the courts to the local authority to the police, all built on nothing. Absolutely nothing. But DC Mackay, there's one thing I would like you to make public. I'd like you to comment. I'm going to do some protests in Aberdeen where I'll be calling you out publicly to ask you to comment on why you executed yourself under officer constable in the way that you did. And what were you trying to achieve? And do you realise the detriment to all involved because of police involvement in the normal lives that are just getting on with life? Thanks for listening. DC Mackay, there's something that I forgot to mention was a breach of the GDPR 2018. Now, when you first approached, you asked me my name and I gave you it. What you then done was proceeded to take out your electronic notepad and place my detail into it. I said that I didn't give you any permission to record my detail into whatever inquiry you were doing, and you were not to put it into that electronic device. You announced at that point in time that you knew me from Bodom, then later claimed that you had never met me before. But you announced that you had known me from Bodom, so for that reason, that was going to be the reason as to why you were going to record my details, which is a contravention of the GDPR 2018. Can I ask you why you would have done such a thing? To have left a detail whilst in the execution of a warrant that you had reason to speak to me. But what does that report look like now, DC Mackay? I'll be making a freedom information request, and also, because this pertains to the ongoing hate crime, racism, organised crime, and the destruction of Cole and Toby, two perfectly good specimens of Rottweiler as qualified by people who travel the world looking at canines. Qualified by people who are more than qualified to be canine psychologists, and are far more than that. We're also more than qualified in the law to know where you have put a foot wrong. And to try and suggest by your behaviour and your actions, forget what you say, that I am in some way someone who would speak to the police when I am the only recorded mute on the police national computer. That means I am not a grass. I don't speak to police officers. But look at what you have managed to achieve. Whilst the contravention of the Office of Constable is multiple occasions right across the board, not only in the execution of the original warrant, because on the basis in which the warrant was craved on, being the evaluation process, the police's intervention for a welfare check at another address, unrelated to me, nothing to do with me. Whilst in the execution of that illegally craved warrant, you then involved me. You sort of killed two birds with one stone with the execution of three individual constables can come up to three different people who have just met, just that minute, that very second, met as two people approached across a car park. You must have thought you had a lot of birds with the one stone, because without speaking to each other, I still question how the hell yous would have known to have operated in such a way to search two individuals and not search myself. Of course, it's understandable, but everything else has been going on. You see in the background gardens, you see in the background people out shouting at me, calling me all sorts. Thieves, people not paying me, malnutritioned for 5 years and trying to fight my way out of illness, fatigue, exhaustion by doing lots of heavy hard work, and people simply won't pay me. Who could have asked them to do that? Police Scotland, DC Mackay. And what was your intentions here? I think it's in the public interest for you to make a public statement as to what the hell you are doing whilst officiating within the capacity of a constable. Thanks for listening.
What's your name, sir?
DC Mackay.
DC Mackay?
You have a lot of issues with drug dealing or anything around here?
No,
No.
not really.
Quiet.
It got quiet about 2022. You know, there was folk living down the bottom there. And believe it or not, we started feeding the guy and talking to him and really getting into his seed. And he did clean up his act. And with the help of his sister, who worked in the council, he was able to get re-accommodated. And as far as I'm aware, he's working in a bowling green now.
Okay.
He always had the job,
Uh-huh.
but he's cutting grass in a bowling green. And the last time I did see him, I must have impressed on him with my beard, right? Because he's grown a beard identical to mine.
There you go.
And he used to be fed him and that, but there was something in him that he hadn't seen this before, and that's what touched him. And then he started refusing the food. Then he came all the way down about 8 months after being missing, and I went and boarded up his flat because folk broke into it. So I put perspex out of the glass, done stuff like that. And he came back 8 months later to thank us. He says he'd spent a time in Untried, and that had brightened it. All he could think about was me.
Yeah.
And he couldn't remember this address, so he couldn't write to me. And he was asking everybody who I was, and
Yes.
but nobody knows me here, or everybody knows me here infamously, right? Thanks to Police Scotland and my gripes with them. But having said that, you'll be aware of all that as well.
No, I used to work up the road, so that's the.
In Peterhead.
I don't think I've ever met you, but I know
Right.
the name.
Well, I've already had it confirmed with me that Sergeant time he's an inspector
Yes.
had informed Adult Protection Support that was PC James Fraser, Robocop, who was sacked in 1999. He was an Inverness police officer who frequented Fraserburgh, and him and Sergeant were reckoned to be, you know, the Doug's Bosley police and the got things done. Right, maybe not ethically or morally, but they got things done, and this was noted by the police staff. So he was nicknamed Robocop, but Inspector, as he is now, felt the need to inform prosecuting witnesses that I was Robocop and that I was the PC James Fraser, because he doesn't exist. I checked it out. I even tried to get in contact with him to try and let him know what was happening in his name, because in addition to that, the information that went to a prosecutor who was a defence witness, changed prosecuting witness after I recorded 7 hours with Sergeant Calendar spending time with him, PC Lisa Will. After he spent that time with him, I sat with him in my video camera for 7 hours, so I had to change batteries, everything to keep it going. Sergeant Calendar came in and seen me. I says, I'm not being discreet, Sergeant. He goes, okay, and he walks away again. And 7 years later, this guy who had been helping was telling us later, I plan to kill your dogs. This is roughly how it's happening. And through that period in time, he turned prosecuting witness. Somebody got him hooked on Valium. We had got him off drugs. We had got him off smoking weed. Right, he was gone walking. I mean, the guy was grey, blue. He couldn't walk. He was stiff when we met him. And Kimberly done all the caring for him. I knew to stay back for him because there was something wrong with all this. He knew too much about us, and we've had that prescription prescribed for us by Police Scotland and local authorities, as told to us by previous landlords who've watched what went on in the future and went, fuck, this is too much. And I am the only person, probably, who really knows what it's all about parenthood and stuff. I really know what it's all about, and I'm a recording unit in the PNC computer, so I'll never let that go. But in the meantime, I've still got to qualify myself in the law to know what the hell I'm doing, to catch you what people's doing against me, and to understand Article 8 invasions with the Police Scotland, a private limited company. Alright, I've still got some guidance with the Home Office, but when you look at the Royal Prerogative and you go back to the Promise to Oaths Act 1868, and you look at what comes with the Royal Prerogative and the force that you've actually got, even though you're policing with consent, after 2013, after the Police Reform Scotland Act came out, prior to it and after it, I have spoken to hundreds of police officers. Right, and they've gave me respect. I've even had retired police officers punch me in the air in the middle of Falkirk High Street, so you get that fucking case done. Right, because what I'm advocating is the Chief Constable under Section 17 of the Police and Fire Reform Scotland Act is responsible for all the officers and decisions it's made, but they're also responsible in the private and commercial liability, and nobody knows how to hold that to account. When a police officer comes up and speaks to me, I can notice immediately when the officer constable notices a person standing in front of me. I've got the precedent cases that shows that one good precedent case is where 2 police officers were warrant for a lassie's arrest entered the property, and the lassie struggled, and the police officers were injured. She got sentenced to unpaid work. She appealed against it, and by the time it had got to the Supreme Court on human rights basis, the police officers, even though they've got the ability under common law to act as if with warrant, So they've got a warrant for arrest, so because they know they're in the house, they could still have a potential defence, and that was their defence. Because they knew somebody to be apprehended was within the address, it was a particular type of warrant that didn't allow them to enter the address, so they executed the common law, and it wasn't a defence for the police officers. And it's quite a comical, a couple of last paragraphs of this High Court judgment, right? It's almost like making a mockery of the situation, when police officers really need to realise when they've not got the authority to continue a legal challenge against somebody if they've already fell off the office of constable. There's trained negotiators that I've spoke to at length about this who passed exams on putting that into the fact that the statutory instrument, being the Police and Fire Reform Scotland Act, as it goes in some way contravention to the basic common law powers of the office of constable, because the minute you execute a statutory instrument, you fell off the office of constable and the prerogative powers. So that was my big argument. So I was trying to really help the police, and I explained that, I explained the politics, I explained the bills that were going through Parliament. You know, I explained, I was very well spoken and in a very mannerable way. But what police have got written about me is I'm this cantankerous guy who's off my head. I've got mental health issues, both of us have. I've worked in mental health all my life. I've got a girl in my care called Kimberly, as you'll know, who had global developmental delay, which is something as a chromosome X disorder is designed to debilitate you. What they expect is, put it in the 70s, they put it down to early learning difficulties. It's never changed. That's still early learning difficulties. It's only in the last 7 or 8 years as the Scottish psychiatrist has been looking at the reversal of this and the stimulation of other parts of the brain, and they've been listening to me 100%. They say to me, why are you not working in the field? Racism. Why are you not a solicitor? Racism. Why are you not a police officer? Racism. Why are you, it's all done to racism. And the common law and statutory definition of racism, and what that is and where that develops from. It had been there before I was born. Right, so they had to create Scotland's biggest embarrassment so I couldn't claim something. And I'm no intention of ever claiming that. And my family knows that, and I know that. It's the biggest unspoken secret. But where the pressure is now being applied to, I've been working in this area for about 4 years, and there's not a solo pie me. And I continue to work it. I maintain all the property. But the people at this address and this address, they've smashed, and their address, they've smashed the doors, the windows, and it's all getting put down to my head. Right, to continue a promulgation of a character has been profiled, false character profiling, taken for false witnesses, using landlords and letting agents could be relied upon. So I've already been a letting agent, so I know the up-to-date standards as well for the letting agents code of conduct, the Private House of Tenants of Scotland Act, the tolerable standards, the pathways underfoot. I've done all the drains, I've been up on the roofs, I've been everywhere. I've cut all that. The only reason that's no cut is because the guy told me to leave it, which under the Private House of Tenants of Scotland Act, he can't claim a rent for that property. So this is where police, I know it's Police Scotland because so many letting agents, landlords and everything else came back for the past and says, look, it's the police that told us this. It's the local authority told us this. And every move we've done, which is 23 and 18 years, we were supposed to fall and crash and burn at some point. So now we've got a reputation with the mental health services. They have point blank refused 2 court orders to do further mental health assessments on us at the behest of Police Scotland or any report coming from Police Scotland, because what they're doing is preventing the course of justice by no recording, report and investigating crime. So I can strip the Police and Fire Reform Scotland Act and go to the cornerstone of the 67 Act, the Police Reform Act in 2004. There are various acts in there where the Scottish ministers have stripped away the Police Service of Scotland and left them with unqualified officers coming out of Tull Island Police College. And in my opinion, because it's a private limited company, right, the directorship of that company is the Chief Constable. And therefore, under health and safety issues, there's no longer can the Scottish minister perform under the Private House of Tenants, under the Police and Fire of Scotland Act, because of the dangers that young constables are getting put under. Now, I spoke to a lot of young constables, right, and you can appreciate they agree with me, but because of the politics of things, they'll not come on side with me. But when you go to learn that, if you speak to any police officer from Falkirk and Peterhead, they'll tell you I have never been abusive, intrusive in a police officer's investigation or anything.
No, as I said, this is the first time I met you, and
You know?
it's been good to listen to you, but I've got to go now to bed. Thank
But
you very much.
you've no idea.
It's appreciated. But
Aye, no, but I'm the Scottish Police. I'll let you go. But the Scottish Police Federation and everything else, right? They're listening to me when I'm saying, look, you need to get behind me. Stop the people that are crippling me, because it's only a few bad apples.
yeah.
At this stage of the game, it's only one and one police officer. I'm quite happy to leave it at that. because that's got to be undermined for me to get rid of the reputation that I'm the biggest beast and the biggest paedophile. But in this area, AB24, which holds the biggest, houses biggest, highest amount of sex offenders, I'm a paedophile hunter. And I'm also a racist. And believe it or not, the racism against me caused me to side with the Muslim community, because they're the only people that would talk to me. And I've worked with them all my life. Mr. was even laughing yesterday about it. He goes, James, you're not a racist. You know? I'll let you go, sir. Listen,
Right.
thank you.
Care. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. CID. That came round to talk to us, and I turned the hat off, so I didn't get them coming. And the guy was quite snippy to begin with, so I turned the hat back on. I just started to explain things to him about who we are, things like that. They got a drug search, I didn't. I mean, there's no reason to search me for drugs. They asked me for a drug problem around here, and I didn't mention the guy by name. And because I'm still recording, I'll not mention his name, but the guy we fed spoke to him a lot, and he got his act together. But and after he left, the street was sort of a quiet. But